Are you a fan of the Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you.
It did get switched. They should hear me. Ah, you can hear me apparently. But I mean, I can't hear me yet. I'm not sure if I'm behind on the video.
Soon enough.
Come on, me, say something so I can hear me.
All right, so we'll give it a sec to catch up, but there should totally be stuff now.
I can hear me now.
All right, folks. So sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Maybe Streamlabs got an update or something, but all of a sudden it had all of the wrong audio devices selected. All right, so you can hear you and me on the stream? Because it should
I turned the audio off. So
it should be both of us. J-Scar, if you want to confirm in the chat there, then
I just caught up with me telling myself to say something.
Oh, good. That's good.
Oh, now it's caught up. Okay, yes, I got both. Now I can mute myself and turn off this horrible video so I don't have to watch it. Yes, seems to be working on both now.
Awesome. All right, so yeah, some fun technical difficulties. It's just the way the evening is going tonight. I had a fun trip to the vet with our cat. That was lots of good stuff. But anyway, all right.
Apparently, there's a lot of cat herding going on today.
Now all of a sudden you've got static in your audio. What the heck?
What are you talking about?
Your audio has gone completely sideways. It's just like every time you talk, it's static. It's a good night tonight, folks.
Is it better yet?
No, it's just complete.
No?
Now you're completely muted. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. This is going to be fun to edit later, folks. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have any drink. Jason, do you have a drink? Drink. I'll drink my soda.
It fixed itself yet?
Nope, it sounds just as bad.
Fuck.
There's an odd echo too.
I like extra buttons. Is better? Yes, no?
No.
How about now?
That's much worse.
Yeah, but can you understand me?
Barely.
So if I disconnect this, I can't put it back in because of the stupid Riverside.
All right, hang on. I don't know what to tell you. Well, I can stop. All right, what I'm gonna do, folks, I'm gonna send the stream back to the waiting page. We'll get this figured out, and then we'll be back. So give me just a sec here. Are you a fan of the Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. News, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Sysadmin podcast. Welcome, everyone, to take 2 of the Sysadmin podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and tonight I'm joined by Jason. How's it going, Jason? Hopefully you sound okay this time.
It goes. I sound wonderful.
You sound much better now. It's been
I don't
fun.
know what you mean by take 2. This is the first time we've done this tonight.
Oh yeah, I must be deja vu. I'm totally everything's gone off without a hitch tonight. There's no issues at all, and everything is awesome. There's a song for that. So we're gonna talk tonight about preparing for maintenance, and I don't mean like taking your car to get an oil change. I mean maintenance in the sense of the IT professionals, migrations, maintenance, upgrades, and whatnot of production services. Right? We've all been through them. At least anyone who's worked in IT long enough in any kind of an operations role has had to go through some kind of maintenance. So tonight, I just thought we'd go through almost like roundtable style between Jason and I and talk about some of our own best practices on different stages of the sort of life cycle or whatever steps you might take leading up to maintenance, things to do during maintenance, during a maintenance window, how to plan maintenance windows, and what to do once that new service or migrated service has gone into production, right? So I thought we'd start out with let's see here.
Nate reviews his notes.
Yeah, well, I got distracted by everything going on tonight. I literally wrote up these notes like a couple hours ago. Yeah, how to maintenance. All right, so first of all, we're gonna assume that you've already got whatever it is that you're going to be rolling out. Like it's already planned. You've already got it architected and whatever. And you're preparing to actually put it live. Like you're a couple weeks away from when you want this thing to go live, right? So the first thing you want to think about is how do you make sure this new deployment of yours, whether it's a new service that's being stood up or a service you're moving from an old service to a new one, or perhaps an upgraded system that you're taking an old workload and moving to a new one. How do you know when it's actually ready for prime time? So like how can you be sure that when you turn the thing on or when you cut over to it, it's not just going to fall over, right? And I think the answer to that is
because the developers told me so.
The developers told you so.
No, the developers told me so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
step 1 of the maintenance plan is find a scapegoat.
Find a scapegoat. The developers told you so.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean that's that's valid. You do need a neck to squeeze when things don't go properly.
Yep.
So yes, identify who owns the thing and who told you it was ready to go live. Yeah. But in a more practical sense, I would say testing. Right? So in the old world, back in the days when dirt was young, right? We would simply do things like stress tests against the thing a couple days before it was supposed to go live and hope it didn't explode. Right, and there were tools to get that done. We used to use one at the college called JMeter. Remember that one? Where it would basically just do like a bunch of requests against a web application, and most of the stuff that we were putting live was web applications. But nowadays,
remember that one? We still use that. Come on.
You still use it? Okay. I don't really have much reason to do those sort of
my
tests
last job.
anymore.
My last job used that a lot to do their stress testing.
So
now, I mean, things didn't always go well, but
in today's world, you also have, in the DevOps world, right? You probably have things like unit tests and whatnot built into your build pipeline, so that when new code is written and deployed or ready for deployment, all these tests, maybe not stress tests, but functionality tests, are performed, sort of during the pipeline, right? Now, Jason, you might have more experience with that than I do. Is that really like is that all the awesome?
Do you have any job openings? Do you have job openings? Because like you're describing like a place that would be wonderful, that has all of its its stuff together and would all work flawlessly. I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, I'm only speaking in theory.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So I guess ideally that would be something you could do is have testing, right? So you want to stress test your. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it depends on the age of the company and the maturity level of the company, right? So, older, you would think that older companies tend to have their stuff together, and some of them do. The vast majority that I've encountered do not, and they're still doing things the way that things have always been done, which is off the cuff and kind of dumb. So there's not always unit tests. Matter of fact, unit tests is something that I'm starting to encounter more recently than I have over many years. It's starting to get pushed in various places, and that may be because my job these days is DevOps versus being a network engineer / sysadmin.
Yeah.
So the change in title seems to be putting me in companies that recognize that these things are important. Not that they're doing them, but they pretend. And then you have young companies, your startups.
They use all the buzzwords. Yeah, that's what matters, right?
Right. You have your startups where unit tests are. It depends on the developer. It depends on the mindset of the people putting it together. Because remember, a startup is generally, how incredibly fast can we build something? Because, oh God, we're bleeding money.
Right.
And unit tests don't give you money. I know our product is broken, but we'll fix that in the next release, and then we were showing improvement as we do it. And
because
like legitimate
because
strategy.
You have investors that are like, we gave you a bunch of money, we need to see a return on that. And it's not, I don't want to say it's not important, but it doesn't look as good to say, hold on, it's not quite ready yet, as here, look, we have a thing. Yeah, the car only has 3 wheels, but we have a car.
Right, and the next version is going to have 4 wheels. 2 of them won't work, but we'll have 4 wheels. And then the version after that, 3 of the 4 wheels are going to work, and it only goes backwards. But hey, it's moving now.
But it might have a horn. So, we're going to implement horn in version 3.
Right. So there's always changes, and eventually one thinks that eventually things will catch up where you go, okay, we've hit a point where we need to start being stable, and unit tests help being stable a lot.
Yeah.
If they're written correctly, because that way, dev 2 goes and makes a change, and 5 unit tests start failing. Well, as long as they don't skip the unit tests in the build pipeline, you'll know that something's kind of hinky and you got to go fix it.
Yep. Yeah, I always imagined that writing a unit test to test a piece of code as you're writing the piece of code is probably the best practice there, right? Because it's what the code is supposed to do is still fresh in your memory. So writing a test to test whether the code is doing what it's supposed to, it makes sense to get it done then. But I don't know. Is that?
Yeah, we're veering off topic a bit, but there are several different mindsets as to unit tests. So there's what they call test-driven design, which is that you write all of your unit tests up front before you write any actual code. So the idea is that you design the tests to allow the code that you want. Like it should be designed so that the output of the tests is the output you're desiring from your code, right?
Okay.
So if you're passing the tests, your code is doing the right thing. I find that difficult.
It does sound
my
difficult.
head doesn't wrap around it properly.
Yeah. Like I get it in concept,
then there's
but
right.
Like I have enough trouble starting a new project to begin with, let alone starting the project by looking for the result first. That seems really backward.
Yes. Yeah, it does. Yeah, but the people that I know that do it, like swear by it
Well,
and love it.
if you
I
can
have,
work that way, it sounds like a great way to do it. Like to use the car analogy from before. I want a car that'll go 127 miles an hour, and I want it to have 4 seats, and I want it to fit 4 people comfortably, and those are my tests. Right, make me a car that does those things. Right now, you have an idea what your goal is.
Those are goals.
Right?
I mean, the test would be more like I turn the wheel to the left, the tires should turn to the left.
I was trying to simplify.
Turn the wheel to the right, the tires should. Yeah. So I mean, the typical pattern I've seen is, you write your code, and then before you commit your code to the repository, you write unit tests that wrap that code, and you use things like code coverage systems to identify if your code is properly being covered. That's typically what I see.
So there's code to analyze the code that does the tests for the code.
Yeah, and unit tests are not fun to write. They just aren't.
No, I'd imagine they wouldn't. It's not nearly as interesting as writing the actual code might be, right? So
it can be kind of a slog. But that said, there's a whole different mindset that says that if you're the developer, you should not be writing a single unit test at all, because I've done this and seen this. If you are the developer and you write code that adds 2 numbers, you're going to write a unit test that tests that those 2 numbers are added. But you're not going to write a unit test to see if the answer that comes out is a letter or a symbol, or a negative number, or you're not going to write all the edge cases, because, well, it should never do that, because you wrote the code to do the thing that you want it to do. Duh.
Yep.
And I mean, I know you have stories about putting in negative numbers for prices for things. That's
exactly what popped into my head, but I've told it 3 times on the show, and I'm not going to go into it again.
Yeah, I know. So this kind of mindset is that you have a testing team or a set of other developers, and their job is to write tests for the code. Right. They get a description of the function on what it's supposed to do. This function takes 2 numbers and it returns the addition of those 2 numbers. Okay, I'm going to write a bunch of tests to test that sort of thing.
What if I feed it a chicken and a number? Does it come out with a number, or does it return an error? Right.
And of course the
chicken does not.
Yeah, exactly. The unit test itself is only testing the output. So you have to feed it garbage to make sure that garbage in results in either an error or something that's reasonable. So there's a lot of different stuff to that, and when it comes to bring it back around to deployment, I mean, unit testing is only one small piece of the whole thing. That's code. But deployments are you deploying code that your developers have written? Are you deploying some open source thing you found on the internet? Are you deploying some enterprise crazy thing that you had consultants come in and help build for you? What is it that we're deploying? Because there's different ways to handle all those different pieces.
Right.
One would expect that if you're doing like a normal code release, even if it's a new product, but if you're doing a normal code release, as part of the development process, you've already gone through all of the testing. You've done your normal testing. You've run all of your corner cases. You run your security tools against them. You've done your performance testing, right? So, all of that should be done way before you ever think about deploying it.
Right. And really, I guess if you think about it, in the world that we're describing here, right, the goal is that you can make microscopic changes to that code and push them like whenever. That was the thing they were talking about with the DevOps movement years ago. Just, no more maintenance windows. You just make micro changes and roll them back quickly and easily if they fail. That's not the truth for everything, though, right? There's still I need to roll out a new Oracle server. That's not DevOps.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it could be, right? But there's certainly use cases where it's it's just the scale of it is too big that you can't just do it whenever, right? Which was the dream of DevOps.
Yeah, I mean, so I can't speak to Oracle because that's sort of a weird case, and anyway,
it brings back nightmares.
But I can say that I do know of people who have automated deployments of things like Kubernetes. Once straight from short of like, as long as there is hardware to run this thing on,
right,
they can push a button and it will install the operating system, configure the operating system, install Kubernetes, configure Kubernetes, set up all the certificates, build the entire thing from scratch. And you just give it a couple of inputs.
Yeah, that's one of the goals of OpenStack, for example. You can deploy to bare metal with OpenStack, and you don't have to deploy just OpenStack nodes. You can deploy, a database server or something on bare metal.
Right.
Or in a VM, right? That's one of the attractions to systems like OpenStack, and there's other things out there that do that. It's just the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, you have stuff like Terraform that can deploy to anything from like your big cloud providers, Amazon, Azure, Google, but then you have all it'll also deploy things to like Hyper-V clusters or VMware clusters.
Yep. Hybrid cloud. That's the word. That's the buzzword. All right, so you've got your whatever it is that you're going to put live, whether it's an application or infrastructure or whatever. You've got it all tested. You're pretty sure it's going to hold up to normal workloads and maybe even workloads plus some, which is even something we didn't talk about, right? So you spec out your system, but you don't, you might spec it for day one operations plus some percentage based on growth, right? And you don't want to test it against load from just normal operations. You probably want to test it for load plus growth, right? So that's just something else to consider. But we're going to assume that you've passed all that. The thing that you want to put live is ready to go. Now, how do you plan when to put it live? Now, you and I have both worked at places where maintenance windows were very on the fly, and we've also worked at places where maintenance windows were a very rigidly planned thing. There's a certain day every week or several days every week, certain hours every week during that day or those days where you can make changes, right? And that's a level of maturity that a lot of places don't have, and it's also a thing that some places maybe even reject. They don't want that rigid of a cycle. So I just kind of thought maybe we would try to weigh some of the pros and cons of like, how do you pick when your maintenance window should be? Say there is a schedule, or maybe you're trying to get your company to implement a schedule like that, right? So to me, you need to identify when your sort of off-peak time is, right? Maybe that's once a week. Maybe it's twice a week. Maybe it's a couple months out of the year, right? Maybe you work in retail and you cannot possibly have any interruption the whole month of November and December because of Christmas, right? Or because of whatever. So right, I guess you have any input there? Like, have you? I think you were there. Maybe you weren't. Maybe it was already in place when you started at the college. But I think you were there to help implement those maintenance windows when we were in the college. They were already established when I got there.
They shifted around, and a college is actually pretty easy for maintenance windows because it's typically 9 to 5 Monday through Friday is kind of like your quote unquote busy period, and any time outside of that is really I mean, it depends on what's being updated, right? So if you're looking to update things like we'll take the college as an example. If you're looking to update things like courseware, something that affects live classes, something along those lines, well, you can't do that between 9 and 5 because there's live classes,
right? But
you can do that kind of anytime outside of that,
right?
But then when you're talking about maintenance windows that affect things like networking gear, or networking gear is probably the biggest one, but arguably email.
Don't let the Wi-Fi go down.
At that point, right? At that point,
they'll make a Twitter account to complain about it.
Yeah, it's it's kind of best effort because best effort to find a time to do it. So you kind of say for networking stuff, you go, well, super late at night or super early in the morning because, you know, people will be sleeping, and that's kind of your time.
Right.
You know, but there's some, like, again, email is one of them where it's like, well, I mean, in theory, you know, you kind of don't want to do it during busy times, like during the day, but anytime after that is kind of fair game because everybody's doing email all the time. You gotta kind of notify people.
Right.
But there are a lot of companies now that, you know, their maintenance window is non-existent. Like they're a global company with 24/7 operation. And the game changes completely for those sort of companies. And it depends. I think it heavily depends on what exactly your maintenance is for.
Right.
You know, if your maintenance is for, you know, something simple like you know, upgrading the OS on one of the node, like across your enterprise or something, like, and I say that's simple, but like with a lot of the way things are configured these days, it's all cluster based. So you can take a node and a cluster down and upgrade it. It's not a big deal. Like this should be a, you know, a maintenance thing that can be done arguably at any time, because again, you're taking down a node, but it's a redundant node.
Yeah. But, and again, that all comes down to how well you did your testing, right? Did you test that redundancy? Did you test failover? Did you test migrating workloads? Things like that. So
right. In any case like that, the best, or my, you know, the way I look at it, the best way to look at determining when you can make those changes is to actually look at graphs of, you know, you should be graphing your busy times. Like on average, when is our when are downtimes for this particular, you know, thing that we're looking to upgrade,
right?
Or do maintenance on, and then kind of, you know, you have to be flexible enough to work around that. And you'll find that, you know, when it comes to clusters, you know, as long as you're not doing a launch of some new product or something, you know, at the same time, clusters can probably be done just about any time. Especially when you're dealing, again, with a global company where you have to be up 24/7 anyway.
Yeah, as long as
but
that
then there's
cluster,
other things that are like super dependent.
Yeah, as long as that cluster's not running hot all the time, right? Like it's at capacity, and losing a single node will actually cause, you know, an outage of sorts.
That's
that's poor planning.
You are right. You're overutilized, and your maintenance should be
yeah.
Your maintenance there should be adding capacity, not upgrading things that are already there.
Right.
But you know, like sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and say, like, there's, you know, things depend on this, you know, this node or whatever that we're upgrading. We have to put a maintenance period, and you just, you know, notify people far in advance and notify them 100 times that this thing is coming. And then, you know, when it comes, you shut it down and you do it. And you deal with the fact that everybody's going to complain because nobody ever reads their email.
Yeah, that's a whole other problem, right? And I didn't even put that in the outline. Like, how do you deal with notification, and how long of a window do you need to notify, right? And that's another case for set maintenance windows, right? That was one of the reasons we had them the way we did at the college, is because it was published everywhere. If it's Wednesday morning, you know, if it's 2 a.m. or between 2 and 4 or whatever it was on Wednesday morning, and things are down, don't call us, because it's probably a maintenance window. Right? And yes, we announce maintenance windows and we tell you what's being changed and whatever, but there's a good chance that if it's between those hours on this day, it's probably a maintenance window, and, you know, give it some time.
Help this wasn't open at 2 a.m. anyway.
You're right. But, you know, the point was the expectation was set that these are the hours that we could be doing maintenance. If there's problems during those hours, it's probably maintenance. Give it some time and check back when the maintenance window should be over. You'll probably hear from us, you know, that we did something, right? So
in a more modern, mature system, for some things, clearly not everything, but for some things, like, you know, applications that you're running, upgrades are done on the fly at any time new code is available, because you can do A/B testing. So, you know, you deploy your new version alongside your old version, and you slowly migrate customers over to the new version, monitoring the entire time. And if you see a problem with the new version, you flip them back to the old one and kill the new one. You know,
Right.
and you continually do that until, you know, people are safely on the new version, and then you can spin the old one down, and then you know, wash, rinse, repeat.
Yep. More of a sort of a soft, well, I guess not soft migration, but a stage migration maybe is the word I'm looking for, where it's you take a chunk at a time,
orchestrated
until everybody's moved over. I've been through a few like that. I've also been through a few that are hard cutovers. And I've been through a few where we've had to roll back. So yeah, it's always good to have that safety net where you can just be like, this ain't working, flip it back.
I mean, that brings in the other. Let's see. You don't even have that in here. So I mean,
may not.
You know, you're planning you're planning the maintenance window here, but like, you know, part of a maintenance is having a run book or having a
Oh
mop,
yeah,
a
I did
method
intend
of
to put that in
procedure,
here and forgot about it.
or you know, whatever stupid term we're coming up with these days for the piece of virtual paper that says these are the steps to do the upgrade, these are the steps to undo the upgrade when it you know, inadvertently screws up.
Yep.
And these are the steps to yell fire and run.
Yep. Yep. And this, you know, this
these are the resume generating events.
This kind of runs into the next topic. I just didn't really outline it the way I had hoped I was going to. But yes, this reminds me of, again, when we were at the college. Our boss at the time was very much about the dive plan. That's what he called it, the dive plan, right? If you have a maintenance, you write down the steps on the things you're going to do, and you try to figure out what rollback could be, if rollback is an option, right? One guy that we worked for basically said there has to be a rollback for everything that we're doing. Otherwise, it's, you know, you shouldn't be doing it. And sometimes there just isn't, right? Like some upgrades, there wasn't an easy rollback, except maybe like a snapshot and restore, right? But anyway, having a plan going into your maintenance is a really good thing. I remember when I was administering Zimbra, we had a pretty complex Zimbra install. It was spread out across, like, by the end, it was like 12 servers, right? There were mail processing servers, there were mail store servers, there were IMAP servers, like there were all these different pieces involved, and proxy servers and all kinds of stuff. So whenever I would do a Zimbra upgrade, it wasn't just like log into the mail server and run an upgrade. It was things need to be done in a specific order. They need to be done across 12 different servers, and they need to be done in a way that's not going to break anything, right? So and this goes to the preparation, right? We had a completely separate install that mimicked production in dev, when basically I would, in preparation for a Zimbra upgrade, I would make sure dev was in a good state, and I would upgrade it. And then I would revert to the snapshots, and I would upgrade it again. And I would revert to the snapshots, and I'd upgrade it again. I would go through the upgrade 3 or 4 times, so I knew everything that was supposed to happen and when it was supposed to happen. And then when I did the production upgrade, it was just basically like I'd start the upgrade and I'd like go get a coffee, right? Because I knew every little piece. So you know, that goes to preparation, right? And the next segment I wanted to talk about here was how do you prepare your team for go live? And that's not just your team, it includes you. It's not just you preaching to your team. But basically, if you're in an environment where you're not the only guy, which hopefully you're not, although in the case of that story I was just telling, I was kind of the guy. But, you know, you probably have an assistant, or you probably have another sysadmin, or you probably have a team of sysadmins that all are expected to support different services. You may have your specialties and they may have theirs. But the idea is here that you may want to go on vacation sometime, and other people are going to have to know how to support the thing that you're specializing on, right? So, and that goes for maintenance as well, right? What happens when you're up at 2 a.m. doing your upgrade, and you are just spent at the end of it, and you're like, all right, it's live, I'm going to bed. You probably want to get some sleep at the end of that. Well, if something goes wrong 3 hours after you fell asleep and no one can get a hold of you, people around you need to know what happened, what went on, and how to fix problems, right? Otherwise, you get woken up and you don't get to sleep. I see you snickering over there. You have a story?
No one can get a hold of you.
Yeah, right. No one can get a hold of me because I turned this thing off.
I did the upgrade. Yeah, I did the upgrade, and oops, I forgot to leave my phone on purpose.
I left my phone on my desk and I rolled over into bed. Yeah. So anyway, what that comes down to is, did you document the service well? Did you document your plan for the upgrade or whatever you're doing well? Did you tell other people what you were doing? And did you tell them where to find the documentation? If it's a complex architecture, did you make a diagram so that people can glance at this and go like, oh, that's what all these 12 servers do, right? In the example of my Zimbra setup. And did you brief anybody so that someone else can jump in and fix the system that you were working on simply by using your documentation and your notes and whatever, right? That's more important than you think, and no one likes documentation. No one likes making diagrams and writing docs. I guess some people do. Most people don't. In my experience, most sysadmins are all about the point in time work and less about all the paperwork that goes around it, right? So I'm telling you,
that documentation that documentation is super important for incident response. So in the case that something goes wrong, whether security related or not, and it generates some sort of operations response, because an incident has happened, that documentation at least covers you to say these are the things that he did. So the fact that component Y is flipping out and is broken, that has nothing to do with this, because component X is the thing that was upgraded. So now you have some written documentation that says that this is what I worked on, these are the things that I did to it, and it can help the operations team identify when problems arise afterwards. Because what I typically see is, and this is both operations folks and just normal clients, is, well, it worked fine until you did an upgrade last night. Oh, well, that's wonderful, but you're complaining that the volume on your computer isn't working, and we upgraded the web servers, the web server in Australia. Like these things are not related.
Right.
Yeah, but it worked until you upgraded that web server. Like, okay,
must be related.
Yeah. So like and that happens like a lot. You upgrade something or change something or whatever, and people start identifying new problems that in some cases you'll find out that problem that they're complaining about, that's existed for a year. They just haven't said anything.
Yeah. I mean, the real problem with all that though is that sometimes they're not wrong.
Right.
Sometimes it turns out that in some weird way, that strange thing that they're reporting that couldn't possibly be related to the maintenance you did is right. And that just reaffirms that belief that, oh, IT did something, therefore my VCR clock is now flashing 12. And really, it was just that they had a power outage overnight. God, VCR. Does anybody listening remember a VCR?
What's a VCR? I don't.
Yeah. It's what we pirated movies with before the Pirate Bay. Anyway. So
back when we had beepers.
God, the old pager. I never actually had well, no, I did for a short time have a pager instead of a cell phone pager. I remember when we switched over.
Several different types of pagers.
Yeah.
Matter of fact,
I've still got it. It's over here.
On my shelf somewhere is my old pager.
Yeah. I always joke that I'm a better processor than I am a NAS, because I do better jumping into a situation and solving problems than I do recalling documentation or even recording documentation, even though I know those things are very useful. And to be honest, that's how most of my career as a sysadmin went. Oh, something's on fire. Get Nate. And I jump in, diagnose the problem, do my best to fix it, and we'd move on. And the problem is that your whole team probably isn't good at that. If you are, that's great. Like, that's a good skill to have as a sysadmin. But as much of a hero as it might make you look, it doesn't help the other admins who are maybe better at following documentation and solving problems than jumping into an issue. And I'll admit, I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of not documenting things well enough. It's something I've tried to get better with over the years. Because there's times...
I think most IT people suck at documentation.
Yeah. Well, there's times where it helps you, not just your team, right? Like
Mhm.
there have certainly been situations where I jump into a problem and I solve it and I think it's fixed, and then we move on with life. And then 6 months later, the problem comes back, and I jump back into it and I solve it maybe a different way, right? And then it's good for another 6 months, and then I jump back into it and I can't remember how I fixed it, and now I can't find the problem. Even though this brain fixed it twice before, I may not be able to fix it that third time. But if I wrote it down the first time, one, you know, we'll have some kind of a record that says Nate did this thing. Two, I'll be able to follow it to fix it again later. Three, we might get something closer to a real solution instead of just break fix, right? So, again, this isn't quite about maintenance windows at this point,
also,
but it's all valid stuff to talk about.
Yeah, but keep in mind that documentation is a skill too.
It is.
Right? So
it is.
You could write documentation that means a lot to you. You could look at it and go, "Oh," and off you go.
Because
somebody else looks at it and goes,
works,
what is this gibberish?" Yeah. There's a difference between writing documentation for the layperson and writing documentation for you specifically. And when we talk about things like writing run books or MOPs or whatever term again we're going to use, the rule of thumb that I've always used, both as a manager and as a contributor is, when you write an MOP, and you're writing down what has to happen both to do the maintenance itself, to roll back from the maintenance, all of those steps that are in there should be written in plain language that, the average person, and it's hard to say average person, that anybody with a modicum of IT skill can do, right? So, you should be writing down, this is the command that you are going to run, install, right. Dash this, dash that, write everything down. You don't put a step in that says, okay, install the software. Like,
right.
Well, how?
Yeah, it's not just
installer has 400,000 options.
Yeah, it's not just run setup. It's run setup with these options, or it's compile with these flags, or whatever it is that you have to do to get this thing working. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, JSCAR says if you can grab someone out of high school and they can follow the documentation, then it's okay.
Right.
Yes, to a degree, right? Like, again, I feel that in some cases there is a reasonable expectation that a person has a certain skill set, right? So, you can write in, SSH to this server. Like, the person doing this should be able to do that. And if they can't, they should not be running this MOP at all. They just stop, walk away. This is not your job. But you should be able to put some things, some very, very simple skills in there and explain that. And remember that depending on how your company is set up and how they do things, like, for instance, we do what we call go no go documentation, which is our, it's a general run book. But included in there is a description of what you're doing, a justification for what you're doing, the steps on how to do it, how to roll it back, what it's going to affect. It's a whole big document that identifies like what's going to happen. And yes, there are a handful of technical people who are going to peruse through it and say, like, oh, well, you can't do that because you don't have access to that thing from that location or whatever. But then you have a handful of, product people who are going to go, okay, we're doing this because, we want to put these features out, and okay, we're going to ignore this section because it's all tech and I don't know what any of it means. And okay, we do have a plan on how to roll it back. Presumably that would work because I don't know what any of that means. Okay, we're good. So it's not just technical people that are going to be reading it. It could be, product people. It could be, operations people. It could be, kind of anybody in your company, depending on what your workflows are. And you have to write a document that has the information for each and every one of those people, and so that they're able to follow it. So, and I mean, on top of that, I would, just as an aside, I would recommend having something along the lines of like a ticketing system to start tracking this sort of stuff. That, will give you timestamps of when things start, when things stop, kind of a running log, etc. That'll save your ass later.
Yes, yeah, that is a valid thing, right? So there's documentation that you've written beforehand, but having a work log while you're sort of in the thick of it is not a bad thing, especially if it's a break fix thing, right? Now, during a maintenance window, maybe there shouldn't be as much think on your feet. It should be very cut and dry. These are the things we have to do. We do these steps. Having a log that says I did the steps and when, that's not bad. That's not a bad thing. But and this again isn't quite specific to a go live, but in a break fix situation, having a work log that says I'm witnessing this, I did this, I did that, I checked this, I made this change, right? That's very important as well, because and then going back and integrating that into your documentation for that service, right? If you make a change that stays, that needs to go back into the documentation, because otherwise, if you're rebuilding the service or if you're trying to troubleshoot the service, you may be looking at the original documentation, not whatever work logs have been done to the thing, right? So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
And make sure you set yourself up to succeed. Simple things like, and I can't, I don't do enough Windows stuff to answer this on the Windows side. But when you're dealing with command line stuff, go into your whatever terminal program you're using, set your scrollback buffer to infinite.
Oh, yes.
Save everything that's there.
Yeah.
That way, when you're done with the maintenance, you can scroll back up and go, yeah, so I was doing this. Wait, what was that command? Hang on, let me scroll up.
Go back and
right,
look
I can copy and paste it right in.
Yep.
Doing GUI based stuff is a little bit different because there's no real scroll back buffer unless you like record the screen or something.
Do a screen recording.
Be careful with that, only because some legal departments get really, really upset when you record things.
Like passwords.
Well, I mean, hopefully it's not echoing it to the screen, but recording anything, legal departments kind of frown upon.
Oh, right, because it's a recorded. You're right. Okay.
Yep, can use that as evidence later. But yeah, I mean, don't set yourself up to fail and just automatically delete everything that happens. Keep log files. Clean everything up when you're done. Make sure you're not keeping artifacts that don't need to be kept. And if you're transferring files, like you have to transfer keys and they have to hit your desktop first or whatever, make sure you clean that stuff up. But this way you have a record of what happened and you can look back on it and you're not necessarily scrambling to remember what happened, because some maintenances go for far too many hours and it's not entirely your fault, but
at
sometimes
the end of it, you're very tired.
tired.
You don't think of that stuff. Yeah, it's good to try to remember that stuff later. And that actually you were talking about security keys, that transitions to a really important piece, I think anyway, is if this is a new deployment of something, or even if it's a significant change to something that's already in existence, has it passed your security and compliance checks, right? Now, maybe you don't have a security group, maybe you don't have InfoSec, maybe you are the person that's trying to implement best practices to keep your system secure, or maybe you have some big overbloated security team that has all kinds of bureaucracy that wraps around every service that is in deployment. Either way, you need to do whatever it is that your company wants you to do to make sure that the service you're about to put live, the service that has been behind gated doors for so long, is now going to be exposed to the public, or at least the user base. Make sure it's secure. Make sure it's locked down. Make sure it meets all your security criteria. Because the last thing you want is somebody knocking on your door. Hey, that thing you put live, it just leaked all of our customer data. Thanks.
Right. So when you're done with your maintenance, make sure that you go back to your blog and you delete that blog entry that had all the information you need to do the maintenance.
Yep.
You don't want that laying around out there.
You don't want that laying around. And the screen recording you put up on YouTube, delete that too.
Yeah.
All right. And last but not least, this isn't quite preparing your team, but it is preparing for the imminent go live. Do you need vendor support? And should you tell them about it beforehand? Now, with all of my Zimbra upgrades, I used to open, what did they call it? A preemptive ticket? I don't remember what they had a word for it. It wasn't proactive. That's what we use at Red Hat. But it was basically, I'm about to do an upgrade. I'm going to open up a case and I'm going to say, this is the maintenance window I'm doing it in. And their support people might say, okay, can you give us this, and the other thing, to try to sort of spot check things before you go live. As a TAM at Red Hat, I help customers open up proactive cases all the time. And what we ask people to do is to provide things like an SOS report from the system before the upgrade, stuff like that. And we actually have support. We'll look over some things before the upgrade, right? And even if you don't have a TAM, you can open a case to do that. And a lot of vendors do these, right? I don't know that I've ever come across a vendor that flat out will tell you, no, we don't do that, because it is, they want you to succeed. Your vendors want you to succeed generally because they want to keep taking your money. It's really what it comes down to. They want happy customers that keep buying their products. So they will do things like proactive cases, have support engineers on hand, so that during your maintenance window, if things really go sideways, you can call them up and try to get help. So the one thing you do want to pay attention to, though, is how, what kind of lead time does your vendor need for those things? Again, using Red Hat as an example, we like it to happen like 10 days or so before your maintenance window. And that doesn't mean we can't open one closer. It's just a lot nicer if we have more warning, because, there's literally support engineers get scheduled to watch your case, right? And the more lead time we have for that, the better. And I'm sure every vendor has a similar thing.
That's maintenance versus incident. I'm sure incident is different. Like,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like thing broke. Yeah, that's a totally different scenario.
It's on fire. Call the vendor. That's different. Like that's an incident.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm sorry. We need a 10-day notice before we can have a fire.
Yeah. That's a different thing. That's a totally different thing. So, but yeah, it's something worth thinking about. It's always nice to have one more level of expertise in your corner when you're going into a maintenance window. Just even if you don't need them, no, you will never hear a support person go, "Damn it, why didn't I get an update at 2 a.m.?" They don't, if you open the case and your maintenance goes completely smoothly, and at the end all you do is say, "Okay, we're good, close the case," they're happy. Right? So it never hurts to have that case open.
Although it is courtesy to tell them that you're done, so that they're not sitting there going,
"Please tell them,
done yet? It's been 6 hours."
Yeah, please tell them when you're done. When you're done. All right. Let's see. And the last thing, and this is the piece that gets missed a lot. And really, there's so many facets of IT where this last little bit doesn't happen, right? And this is how, what do you do after you've gone live? Like, what does the first week or two look like?
Well, the app is up. It's done.
It's done, right? Just walk away, right? So the first week or two after you put a thing live, depending on how big the thing is and how complex it is, maybe it's longer than a week or two, but generally the first couple days, the first couple weeks, you're probably watching the thing really close, because you want to make sure that the thing you just put into production.
That's the operations team. That's their problem.
Yeah, well,
I put it out there. It's on them.
Yeah, we're getting to that. You may watch the thing and you may be right. It could be that the operations folks are the ones that are watching it really close, but maybe that's not the way it works for you. I don't know. But basically, somebody is going to be watching it extra close to make sure that things don't go sideways. You're watching logs closer. You're watching performance closer. But eventually, it gets to the point where you're pretty happy that, it's up, it's running, it's live. Everything, there's nothing on fire, right? What do you do next?
You turn off all your monitoring because it's working properly now. You don't need to be alerted when it breaks.
What I'm talking about is sort of operationalizing the new service, right? So there's a point where it's not new anymore. Now it's just daily business, right? That means it needs monitoring, and you probably did this before it went live, right? It needs good monitoring. It needs good alerts and whatnot tied to it. You want to make sure that the logs are going into your log aggregation system if you have one. You want to make sure that say it's a physical install, right? You want to make sure all the documentation about where the servers are physically located and whatnot, it has all been updated. Make sure all the documentation that you generated while building and perhaps troubleshooting any issues you had on go live day end up consolidated and put into whatever documentation you have for this service, right? Which is kind of what we already touched on. You have anything that you do, Jason, that I didn't cover?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on what it is. I mean, so if your maintenance is upgrade of an existing system, a lot of this stuff is in place already, and you may stay in touch with the operations team for the next day or two, for a short period of time, just to make sure that nothing weird happens, or that if something does happen, the operations team kind of keeps you in the loop. You're not going to actively do anything, but
right.
you want to know what's going on.
Right.
Versus a new deployment where in a lot of cases, and again, so much of this depends on the maturity of the organization you're in. But in the case of a new service, typically what I've seen happen is that the operations team is trained up front on, here's the new service, these are the things to look out for, whatever. But you're not going to cover everything because you don't know what it is. The operations team can't, it's new service to them, so they're not going to have everything. So you work in concert. It may be for the next 6 months, operations team is the first to respond to a problem, but they're given an SLA of if you can't figure out what the problem is in 15 minutes, contact one of us, and we'll help debug it until you have a comfort level with the system that you're able to pass on. And what I've one of the things that, and this is, again, this is a more mature organization, kind of structure, and it doesn't always exist this way. But one of the things that I've noticed in some orgs is that as a sysadmin, DevOps, insert crazy new term here, your documentation is thrown out by the operations team. And what I mean is that they're going to take that and they're going to turn it into operations documentation. They're going to take what you have and go, yeah, okay, whatever. But they're going to document things based on their system. Yeah, so you're going to provide them information, and in some cases you don't provide them any written documentation at all. It's in the form of, let's get on a call, or let's huddle in a room, and you're going to show me this thing front to back, and I'm going to write all of the documentation. Because if I can write the documentation on it,
yep,
I know the system.
Yep, and that's actually a good
tool.
That's a really good point, right? That's a great way to prove that you know a thing, right? The guy who wrote the docs is probably as qualified to manage that thing as the guy that built it. In fact, maybe more qualified, right? So if the person who built it or the person who architected it takes somebody else through it start to finish, and that person can write accurate documentation start to finish, then they may actually be more qualified to run the thing day to day than the person who built it. I mean, maybe not. Right. I don't know, but that's a great way to prove that the person who's now responsible for this thing knows it, right? And that's actually a thing we kind of glossed over and made some assumptions on, right? You need to identify, maybe you don't, but someone needs to identify who is the person who is responsible for this thing or team, right? Maybe it's you.
Right.
Like in a small enough team, the person who architected to build it is the person who's responsible to run the thing day to day, right? That's exactly the position that I was in at the college, and so were you. We didn't have an operations team. We were the operations team, right? So, we don't want to sound like we're in this perfect world where the sysadmin or the architect is this like rock star who walks around and never has to worry about anything at 2 a.m. That may not be your world. You may be the one that has to deal with this, and all the more reason to have good documentation.
I wish it was.
You wish it was, huh? Those are the glory days.
I wish it was. Yeah, I want to be the guy that's like, yep, things are flowing great and just getting paid.
Yeah, right. Unless they're not flowing great, right?
No, then I can just point to it and go, it's that guy's fault. Pay me.
Yeah. There you go.
No, seriously though, I mean, like DevOps, as a DevOps person, and again, like controversy and jump up and down about what your view is on it, but it's kind of right in the title. You're a bridge between development and operations. Some companies seem to think that it means you do both. And some companies think that it means that you're like this middle ground that bridges between the two.
But it doesn't
You know,
really
you
do
know
either.
what development does well enough. Right. You know what each of these groups does well enough that you can help transition from one to the other. And that's sort of my view of how that should work. Like, developers develop this thing that is, you know, presumably going to make the company money, and the operations folks are the ones that maintain it and keep it running so that the money comes flowing in. Your job is to take what the developers created, work it out so that it is up and running for the operations team to deal with it. And it's different. It's kind of different mindsets on what, you know, what each person is doing. A developer is concerned with their app only, and that's it. Whereas an operations team needs to know everything about that app and every other app and how they interact together. And, oh my God, how do I keep this thing up and running? Because if it goes down, we're losing, you know, X dollars a minute.
Right.
Your job is to figure out how to bridge the two. And a lot comes with that, you know, testing and deployment and, you know, building infrastructure. And, you know, DevOps people can do anything from, you know, simply doing CI/CD pipelines all the way to, you know, building infrastructure, doing the operations work, et cetera. And there's a lot of different terms for sort of what we do. Sysadmins, you know, network admin falls in there, SREs fall in there. You know, there's all these different terms, and it depends on what company and what sort of mindset they have and what the culture is there, and how they sort of flow. You know, the company that I'm with now, you know, we're adding all sorts of different departments here, there, and everywhere. And it's like, you know, the stuff that I'm responsible for that used to be like all encompassing is now starting to kind of dwindle down to the point where I can breathe, which is weird. So there's other people, you know, I'm still responsible for, okay, this thing came in. Now we have to get it over to these 3 teams that are responsible for running it and making sure that, you know, it's monitored and making sure that, you know, whatever. But, you know, once that's done, I can sit back and go, okay, what's the next thing? You know, instead of, you know, kind of tearing my hair out trying to do all of it at once.
Right.
And that comes with a mature organization. That comes with, you know, growing the system and sort of understanding what each person does. And maintenance is a big part of that, you know. So, you know, I'm still responsible for some maintenances, but we have, in our case, we're financial, and it depends on the market because we're global. So, you know, where I can do maintenance on system A today, right now, because, you know, it's based in Hong Kong and they're closed because it's the middle of the night. But I can't do maintenance on site B, which is US based, because, well, they're in business right now. We can't do that right now.
It's Monday morning or something. Yeah.
Right. So we, you know, we kind of flow and, you know, it depends. Things are starting to get global. So we actually have people who are kind of around the world. I mean, we're a small team, but, you know, we have people in different time zones who can do different things at different times. So it's this stuff gets complex sometimes. You know, maintenance may not be as simple as like, this thing needs to be done right now. You know, figure out a time.
Yeah.
Because maintenance is starting to, you know, as companies become more global, maintenance is becoming one of those things that's like, how do you schedule that? You know, you're a 24/7 organization. Like, how do you schedule taking something down to fix it? Because at that point, when it's down, you're losing X dollars a minute or X rubles a minute or X yuan a minute, or, you know, whatever.
It's really why this space, the IT space, has matured the way it has into highly available systems, right? Or cloud-based systems, or DevOpsy, you know, systems that are all little microservices that can be easily upgraded and changed whenever, because there really isn't a good time to take a system down anymore. In some cases. Right. In other cases, yes, you can still take systems down, especially if you're very regionalized. But yeah, with a global system, you know, when is a good time for Amazon to be down? Like, when is it okay for me to go to Amazon.com and I cannot buy a thing? Never. Right.
I don't mind when I'm sleeping. If I'm asleep, you can take the site down. It's fine.
Yeah, but when you're asleep, folks in California might not be, and when they're asleep, folks
Yeah, I don't.
in
That's their
China might
problem,
not
not
be. I don't
mine.
know. I don't know about China. Does China?
Yeah,
Are they allowed to go to
again,
Amazon? I don't know. They
that's
they probably have their own Amazon.
I don't know. That's their problem.
That's their problem. You're right.
As long as it's up when I'm awake,
Yep.
we're okay.
Yep.
Yep. The other piece of advice that I give that and this goes for maintenance, this goes for pretty much anything. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
If you don't know something, like my general rule of thumb is if you spent more than 10 minutes banging your head against it, ask for help.
Yeah.
Especially like inform whoever you're reporting to, like, hey, I've been working on this thing. I spent about 10 minutes on it and I'm not getting anywhere. Do you want me to continue, or, is there somebody I can ask for help? But they may say, like, keep on going, let me know when you've hit an hour and you've gotten nowhere.
Right. Right.
But sometimes they go, oh yeah, talk to Bob. He's done that, 400 times, and we're just, we want you to figure it out too.
And honestly, that's something we hinted at but didn't really touch on. Having a rollback plan for your maintenance. When do you need to execute it? Right? Like, do you need a time limit? Do you need okay, the maintenance window goes till 4 a.m. If I haven't made significant progress by 3 a.m., it takes me 45 minutes to do the rollback. I'm going to have to start it then. You know what I mean? So that's a valid thing to try to plan out.
That's a good point.
What does rollback look like? How long does it take to roll back? And at what point do you get to the point of no return, where it's quicker to solve the problem or get through the rest of the maintenance than it is to roll back, right? Because you may have a deadline.
Right.
In some cases, that stop time is a little more fluid than in others. And in some cases, it's if you're not done by 4 a.m., like, you're looking for a job or, X millions of dollars are going to be lost or whatever, right? You need to be done by the end of that maintenance window. In other cases, it's you went over by 15 minutes, whatever. It's no big deal.
Right. And the rollback time for any, say, product A, you're working on a project to go from, version 1 of A to version 2 of A. Could be that the rollback is, as simple as, okay, uninstall the new version, put the old version back in, or restore the snapshot, or insert any means by which you can put the old version back in.
Yeah.
That may be simple, but when you get to, there are certain points where the upgrade process requires a conversion of data of some sort. You're upgrading a database. You're migrating data from, migration's actually usually not too bad, but if at any point you are converting stored data from one format to another for whatever reason, your rollback is probably going to be longer. And there's what I would consider it's not quite a point of no return. I mean, hopefully you have backups, so there should never actually be a point of no return. But, there's a point at which
there's a trade-off in time is what I was getting at, right? Is it faster to work through the problem than it is to roll back? You know what I mean?
There's a point. There's sometimes a point in a maintenance where when you get there, if you cross that barrier, your ability to roll back goes from 5 minutes to an hour.
Right.
Because now you've converted data as opposed to just deployed some code.
Right.
And you kind of need to understand where that is, because that determines whether you need to roll back earlier or later.
Yep.
And again, that's another one where I would say, like, worst case scenario, cover your own ass and call somebody who's in charge and say, I'm having a problem. This is where I am. Here's our options. What do you want me to do?
Yep. Never hurts.
Make it somebody else's problem.
Never. A lot of people think if I ask for help, I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm doing, or if I admit failure, that I'm going to look bad. I got to be honest, right? So the incident I've talked about on this show where I broke our virtualization environment, I spent some time the evening it happened, and then I worked on it a little bit overnight. The next morning, I was in my boss's office, and I said, look, I screwed up. I screwed up bad, and here's exactly, I laid it all out. And there was no red-faced screaming. There was no, Nate doesn't know what he was doing. It was, okay, let's call a meeting. We got to figure out how to get out of this. And it just day by day went from there, right? And it was a long and arduous thing, but we got through it, and I feel like I actually gained more respect by dealing with it the way I did than if I had tried to cover it up and fix it without anybody knowing about it. Because realistically, looking back, there's no way I was going to fix it without without anybody noticing. So, all right. Anyway, I think.
Oh, don't try to hide things. That's a resume generating event. If you try to hide your screw up, don't bother. When somebody finds out, you're going to be finding a new job. And Nate is hearing noises or something, and something is going on in his room. I think he's talking. I think a small child has entered Nate's domain. You've been invaded.
And a dog, too.
And a dog. Oh, okay. Didn't plan for that in your maintenance, did you?
Yeah, right.
All sorts of craziness going on.
And I smell popcorn. They have popcorn. I feel jealous. All right, all that because the Nintendo has locked, because it's late enough at night that they're supposed to be getting ready for bed. All right, so I think we've covered this well enough. Did we miss anything? What do you think? Anything we didn't touch on?
Yes, we absolutely missed stuff. And you know what? Welcome to maintenance. Figure it out on your own.
Time to put on the fire or the fireman's hat, right?
Seriously, I mean, honestly, like you're gonna put a plan together, and at some point you're gonna be going through that plan, and you're gonna go, "I didn't expect that."
Yeah.
And now you're off on your own.
Yep.
If you can't roll with the punches, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, just like I was saying before about being a better processor, right? That is part of being a sysadmin, being able to think on your feet and solve problems, right? Like that's, in my opinion, that is a bigger part of the job than all of the book smart or exam passing that you can do, right? Just being able to solve a problem by thinking it through, keeping your head, not panicking, right? Like that's, I'd say easily 80% of being a sysadmin. Maybe I have the ratio wrong, but that's how it's been for me. You know, oh my God, everything's down. The company's losing money. Do I panic? Do I run around with my hair on fire, or do I just logically sit down and work through the problem? And that served me pretty darn well.
I love the situations where I am, you know, like incident response is like kind of where I shine. I love working through problems like that.
Yeah. Early in my career.
And it's
go ahead.
It's not a hero thing. It's just, it's so much fun to be like dropped into a problem of like, this is broken. We need to fix it now.
It feels good after the fact to have that respect. Like early in my career, when I was still a junior network admin, this is the first place that I worked that I was an admin and not a support person. We had this case where a switch failed in our data center. And we had 24 servers that were hosting customer data connected to that server or to that switch. And we're me and the boss, I'm still relatively new at the place. We're in the data center. This might be like my second or third month there. And we're like, this switch isn't working right. We don't know why. And there's a switch right below it that's got nothing plugged into it. And I say, what about that switch? And he can't even talk. He's so panicked. I'm like, has anything, as far as I knew, there was nothing planned for that switch. So I just like took the uplink cable and plugged it into the next one, and I started moving network cables, and one by one, all the machines came back up. And afterward, I'm talking to the boss, and he goes, how did you do that? I'm like, how did I do what? How did you keep your cool and not panic and like think about using the other switch? I'm like, well, part of it was I made a guess that this was going to work. And part of it was panicking doesn't solve problems.
and the other part is I don't own the company, so whatever.
Yeah, I guess I have less stake in it. If I lose a job, I can find another one. If your company goes under, it's kind of... But yeah, he had no business being in the data center anyway. But like there was a point where he really knew his stuff. And he built the place. He did it all himself to begin with. But when he started bringing in people underneath him, as many bosses do, he started to lose some of that skill set. And yeah, he didn't belong in the data center. He just didn't know it yet.
Some people are good under pressure. Some people are just like they shine under pressure, and some people are absolutely beyond brilliant, like the smartest goddamn people you will ever meet in your life. And you put them in a high pressure situation, and they're dumb as rocks. They don't even. They just sit there
They
and
just
blubber. They
can't.
don't know what to do.
They just can't think.
Like it. Some people are built for it. Some people aren't. You know, and you figure it out and you move on. You know, don't be upset if you're not a person who is not built for a high pressure environment like that.
Yeah.
Or for a high, you know, pressure comes in different ways. You know, like, you know, you can be under a lot of pressure as a developer to have to get things out on time and develop some crazy new algorithm or whatever, and you could be brilliant at that, as opposed to under high pressure because something's down and you need to fix it right now. You know, it's different types of pressure. Some people are good with it, some people aren't. Like, you know, figure out what you're good at and do it.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we've covered it well enough, folks. If anybody has any of their best practices they'd like to share, feel free to reach out to us. So you can do so on social media or join our Discord community. You can make fun of how I say Discord. Oh, Mark's not here. Discord. Right. I think.
Wow, he's got you trained. Like
he does.
Nobody was there to make fun of you, so you made fun of yourself.
Yep. Well, that's why I made the soundbite.
Pavlov's Nate.
The soundbite is there to throw back at Mark when he tells me that I say Discord wrong, because that's me emphasizing how I say Discord. Discord. Anyway, folks, if you got anything you want to share with us, go ahead and share it in whatever way you. I mean, if you can like train a carrier pigeon to send me a note with your maintenance best practices, I would love to see that. So somebody out there that knows how to train messenger pigeons, do that. Someday I want to get one. Anyway, we don't have a bunch of news tonight, so I'm actually not going to split the show in half. So Jason, unless you needed a break, I'm going to play the transition music. We're going to go right into chat. Does that sound good?
Push the button, Frank.
Push the button, Frank.
Push the button, Frank.
Yeah, there's enough news in the world, and to be honest, like today, there's some pretty crazy news in the world. To be honest, I didn't have time today to look through the news. Things have just been busy.
You know, I know stuff has happened. The biggest thing tech-wise that I've seen happen is the whole Razzlecon Bitcoin thing, but we talked about that last time.
Did we?
Pretty sure we talked about that last time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we did. That was the two people who tried to
the world's worst rapper?
The $4.7 billion, and one of them turns out to be the world's worst rapper.
Yeah, we talked about that last time, and we even played the music. It was terrible.
Other stuff, other stuff I'm sure has happened.
Yeah,
but the only tech-related story that seems to be dominating at all is the fact that the Ukraine was invaded, and a lot of people are concerned about cyber warfare.
Yeah. No, I mean, so usually if we come up on a show night and I don't have a lot of news to report, I'll just go to Slashdot and see what's trending. And even on Slashdot, most of what's trending is about Russia invading the Ukraine. Not even from a cyber perspective. Yeah. It's just like, hey, this is big. And I guess it kind of is. So, yeah, we don't have a lot of tech news tonight. So we're going to go through the usual announcements and Patreon stuff in our chat. And then we're going to call it a night. So if you were expecting more, I'm sorry. We'll do better next time. So I do want to thank all of our patrons. I don't think we've had much change in our patronage since the last show. So this is all going to sound familiar because I copied it from last show's notes. We've got Z-Thor, name pending 197, Jérémy, Arinomi, Andrew, Tatro, Bruce, Robert, Matt, David, Solemn, Trooper-ish, Linux Sys 666, gimpyb, Marc with a K, our good friend The Mentor, John the Nice Guy, Marc with a C, Julius, Andy, J, Charles, and 22532, who remains our longest patron. Longest lasting patron? There we go. So, thank you to all of you for your support. Good stuff. I just had to pay for Streamlabs today. and that was paid for out of Patreon money, which is good. Glad I can do that. I don't know if we have any other real announcements for today, except the usual. You can support the show via Patreon, as mentioned, or you can get yourself some merch through Teespring, teespring.com/stores/IronSysAdmin. And, yeah. That was a very short announcement section. Do you have any announcements? I don't have any announcements.
Nothing yet, no.
Nothing yet. There will be a B-Sides eventually. Jason will be involved, and we'll tell you about it then.
Yes. That will be the plan.
I guess that's usually what dominates our announcements section when that gets closer. All right. You have any fun projects going on, or you just been like heads down doing work stuff?
It's been it's been a lot of work stuff. Outside of that, I finally beat Halo Infinite. Oh,
you were talking about that on our last show. You were eventually going to do that.
Yeah. So the frustration is that it's so again, it's I was surprised by the gameplay was so much better than the previous games. The problem is that there's a kind of a move you can do in the game, which is it's a ground pound, because you have like a grappling hook now. And for whatever reason, in the final battle of the game, I clipped through the level several times, and it absolutely unbelievably frustrating. And the first couple times I did it, I couldn't figure out how to get the game to recognize that I was outside of the bounds of the map, and I should die, if you will.
Yeah.
And be able to move back in, and I just couldn't do it. So the only option was to quit the game and restart it, which brought me back way back, because there's
that's no fun.
There's checkpoints, and there's I'm sorry, there's chapters and checkpoints or something like that. And if you quit the game and restart, you start way back. But if you were able to convince the game that you had died, you'll restart closer to where you were. I eventually figured out how to do that, and was able to finally beat the game. Neat game. I like the story. It was, at least it filled in what happened between, it took till the end of the game, but I finally figured out what happened between 4 and Infinite, or 5 and Infinite, whatever the hell the numbers are. The last game in this game.
So where do you go after
a lot of games? But it was fun. It was, I don't know. They have to, though, because it's set up for another game, as you would expect. So now I'm playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is kind of right up my alley, because I'm a Viking. So and it's a lot of fun. So I've been the time that I'm not banging my head against issues and building stuff and working for a million different companies, I'm kind of hanging out with the family, or hanging out with the family and playing games, or just playing games or whatever.
Yeah, so it's good. It's
been
good.
Fun.
It's good to be able to disconnect from work. Like, you and I have both been guilty of this. Yeah, I would argue that you more than me, that it's sometimes difficult to disconnect from work, right? And now that we work from home,
yes,
it's even harder. It's really easy at Red Hat because there's really no reason for me to be working off hours, unless a customer tries to contact me, and really then it's just like a matter of setting boundaries. For you, still being in an operations, or I guess managerial, I don't know what you're doing exactly at this point, but you said you're working for several different companies, so maybe there's several different hats involved there. Maybe that's even harder, especially when there's several different, like, I'm sure if you're dealing with startups and whatever, there's not necessarily a set 9 to 5, right? It's these things need to be done, right? So it's hard to to shut that off.
You still need to set boundaries. Yeah, you definitely need to set boundaries. And it's taken a very, very long time for me to kind of put that together and work I still screw it up, but I don't care who you are, where you are, what you do, make sure you set aside time for family, for downtime. You can't work all day, every day. It's one thing when you're single and you have, you kind of can just do whatever. Once you have a family, like they need to be prioritized, and it's a hard lesson to learn, but it's a good lesson to learn. So,
Yeah.
I'm much better at it now than I was.
A lot of people learn it by completely destroying their home life and losing their wife, right? So hopefully you don't end up there. Not
So
you
some of us
specifically,
learn
but
it. Yeah, some of us learn it because our wives are vocal enough to say, like, you're destroying things. Cut it out before I kick your ass.
And she could. She probably could. Kick your ass, that
Absolutely
is.
could. Absolutely could. But
Yeah.
no, it's good. It's good. So I have my downtime, and I have like I do work for a lot of different. I have a day job, and then I have a lot of customers outside of that. The nice part is that those customers outside of that are, generally speaking, they don't overlap. So
Yeah.
I can schedule things.
Yeah, that's always good. All right. I guess speaking of games, I'm still very deep into Valheim, which has been a lot of fun. So I think I talked about this last time we did a show. I set up a home server or a personal server, whatever, for Valheim with the intention of playing with my family. And then I started playing and got like really hooked. And the way Valheim progresses, right? Some of the easy areas or the newbie areas or whatever, they also get harder as you progress in the game. So it got to the point where my kids and my wife and whatever, if they logged in and went to a quote unquote easy area, it was no longer easy. So I had to stand up a second Valheim server that I don't touch.
The family server and the hardcore server
that I don't touch unless I'm playing with them. And last weekend, we actually spent a good chunk of our Saturday, just all four of us. That this is right for aging from a 7-year-old to a 12, well, almost 12-year-old, 11-year-old, and then my wife and I playing Valheim together, and it was actually a lot of fun. Trying to get two siblings to agree long enough, especially in a game where you're building things and there's like a lot of like, I made that, don't destroy it going on. That was a bit of a challenge.
So Minecraft.
Well, Valheim in a lot of ways is a more mature version of Minecraft. I mean, really the premise is very, very similar. I mean, you could argue the same thing for like No Man's Sky, which is it's also very similar, but Valheim takes it to the point where, like with Minecraft, you run a private server, and that server has mods on it and whatever. You can do all that stuff with Valheim. We haven't modded our Valheim server, but anyway. But yeah, I forget which kid it was came to me and they go, Valheim's a whole lot like Minecraft on survival mode, and they never play in survival. They always play in creative mode. I'm like, yeah, yeah, it is. So, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I was a little worried that our 7-year-old would not quite grasp Valheim. So initially, I only had the three of us, and my wife and the 7-year-old were playing as like the same player, but the 7-year-old kept basically taking control, and my wife wasn't getting to play. So we bought another copy of Valheim so we all four could play at the same time. So yeah. I've now spent close to $100 on Valheim, just so that all four of us can play. But yeah, it's been fun though. It's been a lot of fun. So
someday I'll play it.
It's really funny, right? Because part of the problem of setting up 4 different people with Valheim is having 4 different computers that can run Valheim. Now, Valheim's not a very resource intensive game. But you still need 4 machines with graphics processors in them, because you can't just play it on like some crappy Intel chipset or something. Which I had to dig deep, right? And the 4th machine I'm setting up, I'm on machines that are like 8 years old. One of which is the MacBook that I had gotten when I left the college, which is like, what is it, like it's like a 2012 MacBook Pro or something.
You have to run Windows on it though, right?
Well, that's exactly what I was getting at, right? Because the reason you can't run it is because it's not on Mac, right? So I started looking, how do I run it on a Mac?
Right.
Like, there's got to be some way. Can I do it? There was a version of Wine that was made for Mac that you could run Windows games on Mac, and I thought maybe I could find that, but nobody's talking about that anymore. I couldn't.
Crossover.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Crossover Office.
Does that still exist? I don't know, because maybe that's
Oh
an
yeah.
option.
Oh yeah.
But everyone's like, "Oh, run it in Boot Camp." I'm like, okay,
Yep.
I could do that, but that's going to require a Windows license, right? Because Boot Camp doesn't include a Windows license. And then I'm like, wait, Steam is a thing on Linux. Does Valheim run on Linux? And sure enough, it's natively supported on Linux, but not Mac.
Yep.
So I put Fedora on the MacBook Pro, and I was running Valheim on it. But we have an older Dell here. I'm pointing like it's right here. It's in this room somewhere. We have an older Dell which actually runs it slightly better because it has an NVIDIA chipset in it versus the Mac has an ATI, I think. Not that ATI isn't any good, but just for whatever reason, the NVIDIA card just runs it better. So we ended up not using the MacBook. So I went through all the effort of putting Fedora on it and getting it working, and then we didn't use it for Fedora. Anyway. So yeah, that's what I've been up
my
to.
time may be coming soon. The Steam Deck is supposed to go on sale tomorrow.
There you go.
The pre-orders, the people who are pre-ordered are supposed to be able to whatever. Something's happening tomorrow with the Steam Deck. I'm in that group somewhere.
Which may involve you having a Steam Deck in your hands. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, within a couple weeks or something. I don't know. If it happens, maybe I'll be able to get to the point where I can play those games.
Well, when you're ready to play Valheim, let me know. Maybe we can get you onto one of our servers.
Start on a new server so that you're not killing me with
I'll make another server just to play with you. Yeah, right. So
yeah, my kids have been playing it, so they seem to love it.
Yeah. So the other thing I did want to mention tonight is something I've just started tinkering with today, right? You guys, maybe not you, Jason, specifically, you've heard me talk about this, but you weren't on the episode where we were talking about the metaverse. I came across... Yeah, right. Well, so I have feelings about what the metaverse, or what something metaversey or the Web3 should look like, and I'm very concerned that what we're getting is not... What?
Whoa.
What?
Is metaverse and Web3 the same thing now?
I don't know. It certainly seems that way.
Okay.
A lot of those terms are getting munged.
Are they? Because, okay, that may be, but like I thought that they were two very, very distinct things.
I'm hearing people talk about them like in the same sentence.
I'm now terrified. I'm not going to sleep for a month. Thank you.
Yeah, right? So anyway, when we talked about the metaverse, I laid out this idea of what it should look like. What I think it should look like, right? And I think it should be a lot more like the web is today, or at least the web was when it was founded, which is decentralized. Anybody can stand up a server. They can put their content on that server. They can run it. And it is, an internet workable, decentralized thing, right? Where one website can link to another and yada, yada, yada. J Scar says Web 3.0 includes metaverse, NFT, and crypto. So there you go. So really, what I'm picturing,
it's all garbage.
Yeah, what I'm picturing is something more like 3D representations or 3D worlds that fit an architecture very similar to the web that it is today, right? Where like I can have a server in my basement running whatever server architecture I want, whatever server package I want, running content that I've created and is running on my thing, and that can interlink with other servers, right? Other worlds, right? That's not really what we're getting with the metaverse. We're getting Zuckerberg coming out with his walled garden, Horizon Worlds and whatever. We're getting Decentraland, and we're getting the Sandbox, which are all closed worlds that don't really interoperate with each other. At least as far as I know, they don't have any plans to interoperate with each other. Well, I tell you all that to say that both J-Scar and I came across this article the same day, right? Of this guy, and I'll find the article and I'll throw it into the notes. But this guy has a similar vision for the metaverse, right? And he wrote a VR server. It's called VR Space. And it's open source. It's very much in its infancy, right? So don't expect like a fully baked thing here, right? It's like one guy, maybe two guys that are working on this thing together. And I started tinkering with it today, and I actually got it stood up and working. Well, quote unquote working. J-Scar can tell you because he and I were tinkering with it. It kind of like I had it working on my laptop, but then I put it on my DigitalOcean droplet to try to let him join in and see if we could do a multiplayer thing, and it just crashed all over the place. But anyway, it's really neat, and I'm going to put some links to it in the notes. And folks, if you want to see a truly decentralized metaverse, these are the sort of projects we need to try to support. And I'm feeling really passionate about that. So, you know, that's one of the other things that I'm working on. I've started poking around. He's got a Redmine instance stood up where he's got message forums and a bug tracker, and he's got all of it out on GitHub and everything. So I really want to get involved in that project, or a project like it if that one doesn't work out. So anyway, I'll get off my metaverse soapbox now. But maybe...
What kind of soap is it?
What kind of soap is it? Well, it's not hand soap. Not like that, like liquid soap. Because I was just thinking...
People say in the soap boxes. I just want to know what kind of soap is those.
Maybe it's ivory soap.
You know. Maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
You and your ivory soap tower.
My ivory soapbox tower. So anyway, I don't know that we had much else for tonight, but I am kind of... I would love to see... So I've talked about someday trying to host an episode of Iron Sysadmin from within a virtual space, right? And I was going to try to do it in something like VR chat because all the infrastructure is already there. It'd be even cooler, I think, if I could do it in VR space. That'd be really fun, I think. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but we'll see.
Dear Patreons, I don't have a VR headset. Please give.
Yeah, but you can borrow one from your kid. It's good enough.
I know. I'm kidding. It's a joke. But seriously, if you could support me with Patreon completely, I didn't have to work anymore. That'd be great.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see, right? Maybe someday we'll get there. I don't know that that's really realistic.
No.
That'd be a heck of a Patreon fund.
I've seen some that are pretty big, but
yeah. I've definitely seen some Patreons that are like, this guy ain't working. I mean, he ain't working at a day job. He's working at this. This is it. This is what he does. Or this person. I guess it's not necessarily he. I always make that assumption. That's very bad of me, isn't it? I always say guy and he and whatever.
Yes. You're a horrible person.
You shouldn't do that.
You should feel ashamed of yourself.
Does it help that I correct it when I do it?
Yes,
but
actually
I still
it does.
Do it.
I think so anyway.
I still do it, so.
You know, these things happen.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, folks, I think that's it for tonight. We want to thank everybody who's stuck with us live tonight. We're sorry about the weird technical difficulties that totally didn't happen at the beginning of the show. Because everything was perfect.
Not my fault.
There were no problems.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah. So if you want to watch us live, you can do so on the second and fourth Thursday of the month, every month, except usually November and December, because the fourth Thursday of those months is usually blocked by important holidays. But you can do so by watching us on YouTube or Twitch. Just look for the Iron Sysadmin podcast on either of those platforms. You can join our community on... No, that was the wrong button! No! Discord! On Discord! I guess if...
Sometimes don't may be a better name.
I guess if you're going to hit the wrong button, that's the one to hit. It's been a fun night. Anyway, there's a link to our Discord community in the notes. You can also find it on ironsysmin.com. You can find us on all the socials, or at least the two socials that we're on, which is Facebook and Twitter. Look for the Iron Sysadmin podcast, although we never actually really check Facebook, because Facebook is a cesspool. I didn't say that out loud, did I?
I don't understand.
The Book of Faces.
I don't understand.
You don't understand that one?
I don't have that.
And of course, you can support us on
Don't have that.
Patreon, patreon.com/IronSysadmin. And folks, I think that's a show.
No!
Yeah, I agree.
Good one. All right, so yeah, everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for doing whatever you do. And enjoy all of your upcoming maintenance windows with all of the sage advice you've gotten from the Iron Sysadmin podcast. You got any final thoughts there, Jason? While I find the thing.
My brain is fried. No thoughts at all.
Okay, well, I found the thing, so I think that's probably all for the best. All right, folks. Good night.
Push the button, George.
Push the button, Frank.